This morning's story is one that is shared by all three of the Synoptic Gospels, with minor alterations in each of them. Mark and Luke said it took place in Gerasa, which is unlikely because the city is some 33 miles southeast of the Sea of Galilee. Matthew says it happened in Gadara, which is more likely because it's only 6 miles southeast of the body of water. Matthew reports 2 men possessed by demons, but Mark and Luke tell of only one demon-possessed man who met Jesus and his disciples on the shore of Galilee. I share this to tell you that the gospel writers weren't concerned with the details. They rarely are. They have something important to share, good news to offer their readers, and they can't be bothered with the particulars. Whether it was Gerasa, which was a large Roman city founded by Alexander the Great, or it was Gadara, which was a city given to Herod by Augustus, both were Gentile cities with a minimal Jewish population. Jesus was in Gentile territory, and in Luke's gospel, it's the only time that he deliberately enters Gentile territory. So it would seem that this is not just another run-of-the-mill miracle cure taking place, but an important one that almost looks like a stealth operation in which he crosses into enemy territory, enters the city, performs a healing, and hightails it out of town back to the safety of his homeland. The man he cured had been possessed by demons for a long time. So long that no one seemed to remember his real name, but only his nickname, which was Legion, because of the great number of demons that had control of him. A legion, you see, was said to be about 5,000 soldiers who acted under the authority of the Roman Empire. His whole identity was tied up in this multitude of demons, and so he was called Legion because the local population may have felt his demons were operating under the endorsement of Rome. I have to pause here to share with you how relevant the story seems to me, given the news headlines we've been hit with lately. Our country also has its own legion of demons that possess it. Demons that go by the names of racism and misogyny and homophobia and transphobia and xenophobia. Demons called greed and entitlement and self-preservation and fear and hatred. And lately, all these demons have manifested themselves in gun violence. But this demon activity is actually something that's been going on for a long, long time. So long that our country, which had once been called a land of freedom, is taking on a new identity as a land of terror, where school children are mowed down and ordinary grocery shoppers are murdered. A land where churches and dance clubs and theaters provide no sanctuary from the demons. And if the man in our story was named Legion out of a nod to the Roman Empire, we should probably go by the name of Congress, because it's under the authority of our lawmakers that these demons manifest themselves, or not. Like the citizens of Gerasa, we have tried to keep our violence locked up, but fear and hatred are so powerful that every so often it breaks loose from our chains in the form of another mass shooting, with nothing for us to do but to count the casualties. But back to our story. When Jesus confronts the demons, they offer a compromise. Instead of outright banishment, they ask Jesus to send them into a large herd of pigs. And when he consented and the demons entered the pigs, the whole herd stampeded into the lake and drowned. So the good news was the man was delivered from his demons, but good news for some is not necessarily good news for others. The pig farmers weren't interested in the new life of the man who had been possessed. All they could see was their livelihood sinking to the bottom of the sea. And so they rushed into the city with their own version of what had happened. How this out-of-towner had literally sunk their profits. And the citizens, out of fear, insisted that Jesus leave at once. Many of our own citizens are afraid. They are afraid of what the future might look like if common sense gun laws are put into place. They hold fast to the illusion that their guns will protect them from the demons that appear to be running rampant. What they fail to understand is they themselves are possessed by demons. Demons of fear. And trying to overpower one demon with another will never work. They see the hundreds of senseless deaths as the price that must be paid for what they call freedom. Gun makers and gun sellers are no more concerned with the lives of school children than the pig farmers were concerned with the healing of the man in our story. The only God they worship is the one that goes by the name of prophet. But if we stick with the story, we discover an unusual twist to it. Jesus seems to know that there is nothing more he can do in this place, that it will take someone who has lived there all their life to effect a change if it is ever going to happen. And so as Jesus prepares to leave, he tells the man, return home and tell the story of what God has done for you. But he doesn't. We read that instead of telling what God had done for him, he went through the city proclaiming what Jesus had done for him. I think that maybe the man altered the message in a way that his Gentile neighbors might more readily receive it. One about a man whom they had seen and heard, than one about a Jewish God whom they had not yet to experience. He seemed to know the best way to present the good news of salvation. And so the rest of his days were spent in testifying to that good news. I want to believe that in time there was a culture shift in that city because of the man's testimony. A shift that took longer to occur than Jesus had time to offer it. But eventually, a shift that moved in the direction of God's grace and freedom without fear. As we look across our land at the carnage left from the demons that have had their way with us, the temptation is to lose hope. Historian Andrew Galthorpe echoes that sentiment when he says this: some days it feels like guns are such a foundational part of American identity that the country would have to cease to be itself before it would give them up. When a gunman murdered dozens of elementary-age school children, leaving their bodies in such a state that parents had to give up DNA samples for them to be identified, it was one such day. But Goldthorpe goes on to talk about a cultural shift that needs to happen. For now, there is the need to mourn the tiny lives which were extinguished. Remember them, and in doing so, remember something else. America's genius is that it can be changed. Never quickly enough, but always in the end. I believe that just as Jesus told the man to remain where he was and testify to a God who liberates us from fear and hatred, God tells us to do the same. And in so doing, we become the change that America needs to experience. A change that never comes quickly enough, but always happens in the end. May you and I be steadfast in our commitment to God's call toward love and grace and justice. May our lives be a testimony to the gospel that delivers us from the demons of fear and hatred. And even in our rage and sorrow, may we firmly grasp hold of hope. Always hope. Amen.